Her first kiss with the cowboy he promised she'd be his last love. The wind carved harsh lines across the Arizona territory in the autumn of 1888, where the desert stretched endless and unforgiving beneath a sky that promised winter's bite. The town of Redemption Ridge, huddled between rolling dunes and jagged peaks, a collection of weathered buildings that served as the last outpost before the vast wilderness claimed everything beyond. Here, where civilization met the wild, survival depended on strength, and weakness was a luxury no one could afford. I had been walking for 6 days. My moccasins, once sturdy and beautiful with intricate beadwork my grandmother had sewn, now hung in tatters from my bleeding feet. The buckskin dress that had been my pride, adorned with elk teeth and painted symbols of my clan, was torn and stained with sand, sweat, and the bitter tears I no longer had the water in my body to shed. My long black hair, traditionally braided with sacred sweetgrass, now hung loose and matted around my shoulders like a burial shroud. I carried nothing but the clothes on my back and a leather pouch containing the last remnants of my life as I had known it. Inside the pouch were 3 items: a small piece of turquoise my mother had given me on my wedding day, a lock of my deceased husband's hair wrapped in red cloth, and a bundle of sage for prayers I no longer believed would be answered. Everything else, my hogan, my cooking pots, my winter robes, my horse, had been stripped away when Chief Silent Elk pronounced the words that had condemned me to this slow death in the wilderness. "You are a barren woman," he had declared before the entire tribe, his weathered face carved from stone, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. "Your belly bears no fruit. The spirits have marked you as cursed. You bring bad medicine to our people. You will leave before the sun sets, and you will not return. If any warrior sees you on our lands again, you will be killed like the diseased animal you have become." If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. The tribe that had raised me, loved me, celebrated my marriage, had watched in silence as I gathered my meager belongings. Not one voice was raised in my defense. Not one hand reached out to comfort me. Even my own sister, Morning Star, had turned her back when I looked to her for support. The condemnation had been building for 3 long years, ever since my husband, Swift Arrow, had died of a fever. 3 long years of monthly bleeding that brought shame instead of joy, of empty arms while other women nursed their babies, of whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. The medicine woman had tried every remedy: bitter teas, sacred ceremonies, sweat lodge, purifications, prayers to the Great Spirit. Nothing had worked. Month after month, my body had betrayed me, refusing to quicken with life, while my heart slowly died. But it was the drought that sealed my fate. When the buffalo didn't come and the agave crops withered in the scorching sun, the tribe needed someone to blame. The elders pointed to the woman whose womb remained barren despite 2 marriages, the woman whose very presence seemed to curse the fertility of the land itself. The whispers grew louder. "She has angered the spirits. She brings bad luck to our harvest. The buffalo will not return while she remains among us." Fear and hunger made people cruel, and I, Anya, became the sacrifice they needed to appease the angry gods. Now, 6 days into my exile, I could barely remember what hope felt like. My stomach had stopped growling 2 days ago, collapsed into a hollow ache that pulsed with each labored step. The nights had been the worst, huddled against rocks or fallen logs, listening to the howls of coyotes and the screech of mountain cats, knowing that my scent marked me as easy prey. I had managed to find water in streams and puddles, but food was beyond my reach. The few berries I had found were withered and bitter. The roots I had dug up with my fingernails provided little nourishment. On the 6th morning, I had awakened to find frost covering my dress and hair like a burial shroud. Winter was coming to the high desert, and I would not survive it. I had 2 choices: die slowly of starvation and cold, or die quickly by my own hand. I had chosen a third option. I would walk until my body gave out and let the wilderness decide my fate. At least I would die moving forward instead of curled up in defeat. The fence line appeared through the morning mist like a mirage. Wooden posts, connected by strands of barbed wire, stretched across a valley dotted with camels, marking the boundary of civilized land. My legs trembled with the effort of each step as I approached the barrier that separated me from what looked like salvation. On the other side, I could see a ranch house in the distance, smoke curling from its chimney, corrals filled with the exotic animals, the promise of human warmth and kindness, but I had no right to cross that fence. I was a dead woman walking, carrying the bad medicine that had destroyed my own people. What right did I have to bring my curse to innocent strangers? I sank to my knees in the tall grass, my strength finally abandoning me. The morning sun felt warm on my face for the first time in days, and I closed my eyes, ready to let the earth claim me. That was when I heard the laughter. It was the sound of children playing, high and bright, and full of the joy I remembered from my own childhood. Before the world taught me that some women were born to be empty, I opened my eyes and saw them through the fence posts. Two identical boys with sun-bleached hair chasing each other around a wooden corral, their voices carrying across the valley like birdsong. They were perhaps 6 or 7 years old, dressed in small overalls and cotton shirts, their faces flushed with happiness as they played some elaborate game involving stick horses and imaginary cowboys. For a moment, I forgot my own pain. The boys moved with the unconscious grace of children who had never known hunger or fear, their laughter creating ripples of warmth in the cold morning air. One stumbled and fell, scraping his knee on a fence post, and immediately began to cry. The other boy dropped his stick horse and rushed to help his brother, wrapping his small arms around him in comfort. The sight of such pure, instinctive love made my chest tight with longing. A deep voice called from the direction of the ranch house. "Caleb, Silas, come on back here, boys. Breakfast is ready." The children abandoned their game and raced toward the house, their boots kicking up little clouds of dust, their arguments about who was faster, fading into the distance. I watched them go, my heart breaking with the knowledge that I would never hold such treasures in my arms, never comfort their tears, never feel the weight of small bodies pressed against me in trust and love. I tried to stand, to continue my journey to nowhere, but my legs refused to support me. I collapsed forward into the grass, my face pressed against the earth that smelled of sage and coming winter. This was where I would die, I realized with a strange sense of peace. At least I had been granted one last glimpse of the life I would never have, one final reminder of what it meant to witness pure love before the darkness claimed me. Consciousness faded in and out like the tide. Sometimes I was aware of the sun moving across the sky, of the way the shadows shifted and lengthened around me. Sometimes I dreamed I was back in my grandmother's lodge, listening to the old stories while strong hands braided my hair. Sometimes I felt myself floating above my body, watching the broken woman lying in the grass with something that might have been pity if I had any emotion left to spare. It was the sound of boots on grass that pulled me back to the world. Heavy steps approached, measured and cautious. A shadow fell across my face, blocking out the Sunday. I forced my eyes open and found myself looking up at a man I had never seen before, though I recognized him instantly as the father of the laughing children. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of a stormy desert sky. His face was weathered by sun and wind, marked by laugh lines around his eyes and deeper grooves that spoke of sorrow and hard-won wisdom. "Jesus," he breathed, dropping to one knee beside me. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" His voice was gentle but urgent, the kind of voice that belonged to someone accustomed to taking charge in crisis situations. He placed one large hand carefully on my shoulder, and the warmth of human contact after 6 days of isolation nearly broke what was left of my composure. I tried to speak but could only manage a whisper that sounded like wind through dried leaves. "Cursed." It was the only word that mattered, the only warning I could give this kind stranger about the poison I carried in my empty womb. The man frowned, leaning closer to hear me better. What did you say? But I had no strength left for words. My eyes fluttered closed as my body surrendered to the exhaustion that had been building for days. The last thing I felt before darkness claimed me was the sensation of strong arms lifting me from the ground, cradling me against a chest that smelled of leather and honest sweat, carrying me toward a warmth I had given up hope of ever feeling again. Jedediah Colt had been a camel rancher for 6 years, and a widower for 2. In that time, he had seen plenty of hardship. His wife, Sarah, had been a bright light in his life, and her passing had left a hollow ache that nothing seemed to fill. He had tried to be both father and mother to his twin boys, Caleb and Silas, but there were days when the weight of it all was almost too much to bear. When he wasn't tending to his exotic herd or the sprawling ranch, he was playing with the boys, teaching them to ride and to be strong, kind men. But he had never seen anything quite like the broken woman collapsed against his fence line. Her dark skin was marked by exposure and exhaustion. Her clothes identified her as one of the tribal people from the reservation 50 miles to the north. He had been checking the boundary fence when he spotted her, a still figure in the grass that he had initially mistaken for a fallen log. Only when he drew closer did he realize it was a woman, barely alive and clearly in desperate need of help. Everything about her spoke of a long, hard journey. Her torn moccasins, her matted hair, the way her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. As he carried her toward the house, his mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. What was an Apache woman doing alone in the wilderness? Where had she come from? What had driven her to collapse on his land so far from her own people? The reservation was a 2-day ride to the north, across rough country that would challenge even an experienced traveler on horseback. For a woman on foot, it would have been a death march. His practical nature warred with his compassion as he climbed the steps to his front porch. He knew nothing about this woman except that she needed help. But taking in a stranger was not a decision to be made lightly, especially with 2 young sons to consider. The frontier was full of dangers, and trust was a luxury that had gotten more than one family killed. But looking down at her face, seeing the way pain and exhaustion had carved lines around her eyes, he knew he couldn't leave her to die, even if she posed a risk. "Papa," Caleb's voice called from inside the house. "Who is that lady?" Both boys had pressed their faces against the window, their eyes wide with curiosity and concern. They had inherited their father's compassionate nature and their mother's generous heart, qualities that Jed had worked hard to preserve, despite the harsh realities of frontier life. "She's hurt, boys," Jed called back, shouldering through the front door with his burden. "Caleb, run and fetch some water from the kitchen. Silas, get the blankets from the guest room. Hurry now." The twins scrambled to obey, their small feet pattering across the wooden floors as they raced to help. Jed laid the unconscious woman on the sofa in his front room, noting the way her breathing was shallow and rapid, the fever that had begun to burn in her cheeks. As the boys brought water and blankets, Jed found himself studying the woman's face more closely. She was younger than he had initially thought, probably no more than 25, with high cheekbones and strong features that spoke of both beauty and character. Her hands, which he noticed as he checked for injuries, were marked by calluses that suggested hard work, but also bore the delicate bone structure of someone born to better circumstances. Everything about her suggested a story he couldn't begin to imagine. "Is she going to be okay, Papa?" Silas asked, his small hand gripping his father's sleeve. The boy's voice carried the weight of someone who had already lost one important woman in his life and feared losing another. Caleb crowded close on the other side, both twins staring at the unconscious woman with the solemn intensity that children reserved for matters of life and death. "I don't know, son," Jed answered honestly, wringing out a cloth in the basin of water Caleb had brought. He had learned not to make promises he couldn't keep, especially to children who'd already learned that the people you loved could disappear without warning. "But we're going to do everything we can to help her." He gently bathed the woman's face, washing away the dirt and dried tears, revealing skin that had been burned by sun and wind, but still held traces of natural beauty. The woman stirred at his touch, her eyelids fluttering as consciousness tried to return. She mumbled something in a language Jed didn't recognize, words that sounded like prayers or pleas. Her hand moved restlessly, searching for something, and Jed noticed she clutched a small leather pouch against her chest like it contained her most precious possessions. "Anya," she whispered suddenly, her voice so soft Jed almost missed it. Her eyes opened briefly, unfocused and glazed with fever, but she seemed to be trying to communicate something important. "My name is Anya." Then her eyes closed again, and she slipped back into the restless sleep of someone whose body was fighting to survive. Jed felt something shift in his chest at the sound of her name, Anya. It was a beautiful name, musical and strong, and it made her more than just a stranger he had found dying on his land. She was Anya, a woman with a story and a history and people who might be looking for her. The thought troubled him more than he wanted to admit. Over the next 3 days, Jed and his sons took turns watching over Anya as her fever climbed and broke and climbed again. Caleb and Silas had accepted her presence with the adaptability of children, treating her like a wounded bird they were nursing back to health. They brought her wild flowers and pretty rocks, whispered stories to her unconscious form, and asked their father a dozen times a day if she was feeling better yet. Jed found himself drawn to her bedside more often than was strictly necessary to check on a patient. There was something about her that captured his imagination, some quality of strength beneath the obvious fragility that suggested she had fought battles he couldn't imagine. Even unconscious and burning with fever, she maintained a dignity that spoke of inner steel. Her hands, when he held them to check her pulse, bore calluses that told stories of hard work and survival. On the 3rd night, her fever finally broke. Jed was dozing in the chair beside her bed when he heard her voice, clear and alert for the first time since he had found her. "Where am I?" I jerked awake to find her watching him with dark eyes that held weariness and intelligence in equal measure. She had pushed herself up on her elbows, despite her obvious weakness, ready to flee if necessary. "Easy," Jed said gently, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. This is my ranch, just outside Redemption Ridge. I found you collapsed by my fence 3 days ago." He reached for the water pitcher on the nightstand, moving slowly so as not to alarm her. "You need to drink something. You've been fevering something fierce." Anya accepted the water gratefully, though her hands shook as she held the cup. Jed noticed she kept glancing toward the door as if planning escape routes, and he remembered the single word she had whispered when he first found her: cursed. What had happened to make her believe she was dangerous to be around? "My boys," she said suddenly, and Jed felt his heart stop before he realized she was asking a question, not making a statement. "The children I saw, are they safe?" Her concern for Caleb and Silas's welfare, even in her weakened state, told Jed more about her character than hours of conversation might have revealed. "They're fine," he assured her, "asleep in their room down the hall. They've been worried about you, asking every day when you'd wake up." He studied her face, noting the way relief flooded her features when she learned the boys were unharmed. "They've been leaving you presents, flowers, and such." A ghost of a smile touched her lips at that, the first real emotion he had seen from her besides fear and weariness. The silence stretched between them, comfortable despite the strangeness of the situation. Jed found himself reluctant to push for explanations, sensing that her story was not one she would be eager to tell. Instead, he focused on practical matters. "Are you hungry? I could bring you some broth. You need to get your strength back." Anya nodded gratefully, and as Jed rose to fetch food from the kitchen, he found himself wondering what twist of fate had brought this mysterious woman into his family's life, and whether her presence would prove to be a blessing or a complication he wasn't prepared to handle. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. The morning sun streamed through the curtains of the guest room, where I had spent the last week, recovering from my ordeal in the wilderness. My strength was returning slowly, like water seeping back into parched earth, but with it came the crushing weight of reality. I was alive, fed, and sheltered, but I remained what I had always been: a cursed woman whose empty womb had brought destruction to everyone I had ever loved. I sat on the edge of the bed, braiding my long black hair with fingers that still trembled from weakness. Through the window, I could see Jedediah working in the corral with a spirited stallion, his movements confident and sure as he gentled the animal with patience rather than force. Caleb and Silas sat on the fence, watching their father, their small legs swinging, as they chatted excitedly about the camel's eventual training. The sight should have brought me comfort, but instead it filled me with a familiar ache of longing. This was a family, complete and whole in ways I would never understand from the inside. I was an intruder here, a broken piece that didn't fit into the puzzle of their lives. Soon Jed would realize what I had tried to warn him about in those first delirious moments. I carried bad medicine, and my presence would bring nothing but sorrow to his household. A soft knock at the door interrupted my brooding thoughts. "Miss Anya," Caleb's voice called tentatively. "Papa says breakfast is ready if you're feeling up to coming downstairs." The invitation was delivered with the earnest politeness of a child who had been carefully coached on proper behavior around the mysterious lady who had appeared in their lives. I stood slowly, testing my balance before moving toward the door. Over the past week, the twins had been my most faithful visitors, appearing at my bedside with offerings of flowers, interesting rocks, and endless questions about where I had come from and why I had been sleeping outside. Their father had gently redirected their curiosity each time, but I could see the intelligence in their young eyes. They knew I was different, that my story held shadows they didn't understand. The stairs creaked under my feet as I made my way down to the kitchen, where the smell of bacon and fresh biscuits made my stomach clench with hunger. Despite Jed's patient care and regular meals, my body was still recovering from the extended starvation of my exile. I paused in the doorway, suddenly uncertain about intruding on the family's morning routine. "There she is," Jed said warmly, looking up from the stove where he was tending a pan of eggs. I was beginning to think we'd have to send a search party upstairs. His tone was light and teasing, the same way he spoke to his sons, and something in my chest loosened at being included in his easy affection. "Boys, help Miss Anya to the table. Breakfast is almost ready." Caleb and Silas immediately abandoned their seats and rushed to my side, each taking one of my hands to guide me to the wooden table that dominated the center of the kitchen. Their small fingers were warm and sticky with molasses from the biscuits they had been sampling, and their touch sent an unexpected jolt of emotion through me. When had I last felt the trusting grip of a child's hand? The kitchen was warm and bright, filled with the comfortable chaos of a home where children were welcome to be children. Drawings covered one wall, depicting camels and cowboys and stick figures that I assumed represented the family. A collection of smooth river rocks lined the windowsill, and I recognized them as treasures the boys had brought to my room during my recovery. This was not just a house, it was a home, filled with love and laughter and the thousand small details that made life worth living. Jed set a plate before me, heaped with more food than I had seen in months. Fluffy scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, golden biscuits with butter and honey, and sliced apples that still held the crisp sweetness of the orchard. My throat tightened with gratitude and something dangerously close to tears. I had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for, to have someone notice my needs and meet them without expectation or resentment. "You don't have to eat it all," Jed said gently, settling into his own seat across from me. "Just take what you can manage. You're still getting your strength back." There was no judgment in his voice, no impatience with my weakness. He had the manner of a man accustomed to nursing sick animals back to health, patient and steady in his care. As they ate, the boys kept up a steady stream of chatter about their plans for the day, their upcoming trip to town for supplies, and their hopes that the new camel would be ready for riding soon. They included me in their conversation, naturally, asking my opinions about camel names and whether I thought it would rain later. Their acceptance of my presence was so complete and unquestioned that I found myself relaxing despite my inner turmoil. "Miss Anya," Silas said suddenly, his young face serious as he studied me across the table. "Are you going to stay with us? Papa said you might have to leave when you get better." "But Caleb and me, we think you should stay, don't we, Caleb?" His brother nodded emphatically, his mouth too full of biscuit to speak, but his agreement clear. The question hung in the air like morning mist, beautiful and impossible to hold. I felt Jed's eyes on me, waiting for my response, but I couldn't find words that would explain the truth without destroying the innocence in the boys' faces. How could I tell them that I was poison, that everywhere I went, misfortune followed, that their kindness and acceptance meant more to me than they could ever know, but that loving me was dangerous? "I don't know," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's not my decision to make." It was the most honest answer I could give without breaking their hearts or my own. I looked down at my plate, unable to meet Jed's steady gaze, afraid of what I might see there. After breakfast, Jed announced that he needed to ride into town for supplies and to check on a neighbor's sick horse. "You boys can come with me if you want," he said, beginning to clear the dishes from the table, "or you can stay here and help Miss Anya with whatever she needs." The offer was made casually, but I sensed the weight behind it. He was giving me a choice about being left alone with his most precious possessions. "We'll stay," Caleb declared immediately, bouncing in his seat with excitement. "Miss Anya, do you know any good games? We could show you our secret fort behind the barn, or we could teach you to skip rocks at the creek." Silas nodded enthusiastically, already planning their adventures. Jed paused in his dishwashing, studying my face carefully. "Only if you're feeling up to it," he said quietly. "They can be a handful when they get excited." But there was trust in his eyes, a confidence in my character that I wasn't sure I deserved. He was willing to leave his children in my care based on nothing more than his instinct about my nature. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it more than I had meant anything in months. The prospect of spending time with Caleb and Silas, of being useful and needed again, filled a hollow space inside me that I had thought permanently empty. "We'll take good care of each other while you're gone. Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you." Jedediah's trip to Redemption Ridge was meant to be a simple supply run, but the small town was a hive of gossip, and he couldn't help but notice the stares and whispers that followed him. The arrival of an Apache woman at his ranch hadn't gone unnoticed, and the community's judgment was palpable. The real trouble, however, came in the form of Cactus Jack, the owner of the mercantile. He was a thin man with a perpetually sour face and a deep-seated prejudice against anyone who didn't fit his narrow definition of proper society. As Jed loaded sacks of flour and sugar into his wagon, Cactus Jack approached him, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the street noise. "Jedediah," he said without preamble, his eyes fixed on Jed's wagon. "I hear you've taken in a guest, a heathen, no less, from the reservation." Jed stopped what he was doing and looked at the man directly, his expression as unyielding as the Arizona rock. "She's a woman who needed help, Jack. Nothing more, nothing less." Cactus Jack sneered, his lips a thin, cruel line. "The decent folks in town are concerned, Jedediah. A woman like that, from a cursed tribe, living under your roof without the benefit of marriage, it's scandalous. It's an insult to the memory of your late wife, and a terrible example for those boys." The words, though expected, hit Jed like a physical blow. He had weathered worse talk than this in his life, but hearing his children and his late wife's memory dragged into it filled him with a cold rage. "Miss Anya is a guest in my home," Jed said, his voice dropping to a low growl that held a clear warning. "She has done nothing but bring joy to my sons and help to my ranch." I fail to see how any of that constitutes corruption. Cactus Jack's eyes narrowed dangerously. "The very appearance of impropriety is enough to damn you both in the eyes of God and decent society. And let's not forget what she is, Jedediah. A woman cast out for bringing bad luck. Do you really want that kind of curse falling on your boys?" The final barb was a masterpiece of cruelty, designed to strike at Jed's deepest fear. Jed's shoulders tightened, and for a moment, he said nothing. He knew Anya's past, but hearing it spoken with such malice, and hearing the fear it was meant to instill, was a different kind of pain. He felt the weight of the town's judgment pressing down on him, forcing him to choose between his principles and the easy path of conformity. The conversation had taken its toll, and Jed returned to the ranch with a heavy heart. He found Anya with the boys, teaching them to track lizards in the sand, their laughter a beautiful counterpoint to the ugliness he had just witnessed. Seeing her with them, a natural, loving presence, made him all the more determined to protect her. But that evening, as they sat down for dinner, Anya's smile was fragile, her eyes distant. She had sensed his inner turmoil. "Jed," she said softly after the boys had gone to bed, "I know what you heard in town. I saw the way people looked at me. It's what I tried to tell you when you found me. I am cursed. I will only bring you and the boys harm." Her voice was a whisper of despair. Jed felt his heart clench. He had to make her understand, had to show her that her love was a gift, not a burden. He found her packing her few possessions in the quiet of the night, a silent, desperate act of self-sacrifice. "Anya, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice raw with disbelief. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm leaving. I can't be responsible for destroying your life. Your sons deserve a proper family, a life without whispers and judgment." Jed took her hands in his, stopping her frantic movements. "No, Anya, listen to me. This curse you talk about, it doesn't exist. The only thing you've brought to this ranch is light. My boys have been happier in the past week than they've been in 2 years. You are not a curse. You are a blessing." His words were a fierce whisper of truth. He saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear that still held her captive. He had to do something drastic, something to prove his conviction beyond all doubt. He knelt before her, right there on the dusty floor of the guest room. The gesture was so sudden, so profound, that it stole her breath. "Marry me, Anya," he said, the words clear and resolute. "Marry me, and let's show this town what love truly looks like. Let's give them something real to gossip about, a real Wild West love story." Anya stared at him, unable to speak, her mind racing. "Daniel, you don't understand what you're saying," she protested, even as a tiny flame of hope flickered in her heart. "I'm still cursed. I still can't give you children. The town will still see me as an outsider." Jed held her hands firmly, anchoring her to this moment of madness and possibility. "Then we'll prove them wrong," he said with quiet conviction. "We'll show them that love doesn't recognize color or blood or the circumstances of our birth. We'll raise Caleb and Silas to be better than the people who judge others by their heritage, instead of their hearts." He squeezed her hands gently. "And as for children, Anya, I already have 2 sons who love you like a mother. If that's not blessing enough to last a lifetime, then I don't know what island. I love you, Anya, and I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth proving that love is stronger than fear." The words settled into her heart like seeds in fertile ground. She had been so afraid of her past, so certain of her worthlessness. But here was a man, a good man, who saw her for who she truly was. "Yes," she whispered, the word barely audible, but carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Yes, Jedediah Colt, I will marry you. I will be your wife, and the mother of your children, and the guardian of your heart for as long as you'll have me." His smile was like a sunrise after the longest night she had ever endured. He pulled her into his arms for a gentle embrace, and in that moment, she felt something she had thought was lost forever: the sensation of coming home. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone, and hit subscribe to my channel, so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. 4 months had passed since Jedediah and I had stood before the preacher, a handful of kind faces in the pews, a stark contrast to the many empty ones. The marriage had been simple, but the promise was profound, and in the months that followed, our little family settled into a rhythm of peace and purpose. The boys, Caleb and Silas, had a mother again, a woman who taught them the silent language of the desert, the way to track rabbits, and the names of the stars in her native tongue. Jedediah had a partner, someone who understood the weight of his responsibilities and shared his quiet moments. Life was good, a fragile bubble of happiness built on defiance and love. But the desert has a long memory, and it was only a matter of time before the past came riding back. One crisp morning, as I was hanging laundry and the boys were playing by the corral, I saw them, 4 riders on horseback, moving with the purposeful stride of men on a mission. My heart hammered in my chest. I recognized them instantly, and the knot of fear I had carried for so long tightened into a noose. At the head of the group rode my brother, Shadow Walker. He was a man of cold anger, a warrior who had never forgiven me for being cast out. He believed I should have been killed, not merely exiled, to ensure the curse was gone forever. Jedediah saw them too and strode toward the house, his hand instinctively checking the pistol at his hip. "Boys, inside, now," he commanded, his voice calm but brooking no argument. As the boys scrambled to safety, Shadow Walker and his men dismounted. "Sister," he called in our native tongue, his voice a cold blade of judgment, "you have shamed our people for the last time. You have married into the race that steals our land and kills our children. You have become everything our ancestors would spit upon." His hand rested casually on the tomahawk at his belt. "I am no longer your sister," I replied in English. The language choice itself, a statement of where my loyalties now lay. I was cast out by our people. I found a new family, one that values me for who I am rather than what I cannot give them. Jedediah stepped forward, his rifle trained on my brother. "That's far enough. You're on my land now, and you're threatening my wife. I suggest you turn around and ride back where you came from while you still can." The standoff was tense, two different worlds colliding over one woman. The sound of an approaching horse interrupted the moment, and I saw her. My sister, Morning Star, riding hard toward us. Her face was grim, her traditional dress dusty, but her eyes held a fire of purpose I hadn't seen in years. "Stop!" she cried, pulling her horse to a halt. "Shadow Walker, you must listen. The sickness that plagues our people is not from her curse. It is from the white man's poison. The well at the trading post is tainted with waste from the mines. The doctor has written a report. The illness follows the water, not the woman." She held up a rolled parchment. Shadow Walker stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. He had built his hatred on a lie, a comfortable lie that explained away the suffering of his people. Now, his sister, his own blood, was revealing the ugly, simple truth, a truth that had nothing to do with spirits and everything to do with human greed. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comment. Shadow Walker's hatred, built on years of superstition and resentment, finally gave way to a hollow, echoing grief. He knew the truth. He could not fight it. He had expected to reclaim a cursed woman, but instead, he had found a warrior in her own right, a woman who had found her strength not in revenge, but in love. He turned his horse without a word, his body slumping with defeat. The other warriors followed, leaving us in the sudden, ringing silence. My sister, Morning Star, stayed. "I couldn't let them take you," she said, her voice trembling. "I saw what they were doing to the children back home, and I knew I had to tell the truth, no matter the cost." We embraced, two sisters reunited, a bond broken by fear now mended by courage. The territorial agent came later that day and officially cleared my name based on Morning Star's testimony and the doctor's report. The curse was broken, not by magic or prayer, but by truth and the unwavering support of the man who chose me and the boys who loved me. 2 years have passed since that day. Jedediah and I built a life that is so much more than I ever dreamed. Caleb and Silas have grown into strong, kind young men, and our ranch is a testament to what a family can build when they stand together. The whispers in town have faded, replaced by grudging respect for the rancher who stood his ground and the woman who found her strength. But the most profound change is within me. I am no longer Anya, the barren woman. I am Anya, a wife and a mother. My Wild West love story is not about being rescued, but about finding the courage to be yourself. My journey taught me that a cowboy love story isn't just about a man saving a woman. It's about two people finding the grace and strength to save each other, proving that a true Wild West love is about healing and redemption. Today's story is about pains that seem to have no way out until a small ray of light changed everything. Do you believe that, even in the darkest times, there's always a miracle waiting at the end of the road? And if deep down you still believe that God is watching over you, quietly arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write it, a blessing may quietly find its way into your life.